New Landing's Job Chat is brought to you in part by the Prosperity Advisory Group, the next step in your financial future, and by the EBS Group with an unparalleled background in Oracle solutions and services.
How do you keep a positive mindset when you're unemployed or in a job that you don't really like? You're going to find out how today on Job Chat. Our guest is Denise Mills. Welcome, Denise.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Well, Denise Mills is a worldwide speaker, facilitator, coach, and trainer. She is the founder and chief mindset officer of LeaderFuelNow and founder of 6 Degree Solutions. In the past, she has founded 26 businesses of over $60 million, as well as coaching over 800 startup businesses. She has been honored as one of the 50 most influential women in Kansas City, as well as being recognized by the Kansas City Journal, Business Journal, as one of the women who mean business. Welcome, Denise.
Thank you.
Positive attitude or mindset. Why does mindset matter?
Well, mindset, I think, is something that most people don't even think about, and yet it's probably the most crucial part of any aspect of life. Mindset is just simply how you think about things. So mindset can be what you talk yourself into and what you talk yourself out of. It's as simple as that. Sometimes we call it attitude. You know, what's our attitude? And attitude is a part of mindset, but more often than not, we just talk ourselves out of something because we're convinced that it's too much for us or not good enough for us, or that it wouldn't matter anyway. And all of that is a part of mindset.
Is it something you turn on and off?
It is something that really is a subconscious part of us, and it just comes out. But you can control it, and you should control it, and you should manage it so that it serves you well.
When you're looking at mindset as something that kind of takes over our life,
which it does.
Yeah. Is it something that we have to train ourselves for?
I think, there is a part of training. I think that the first step really is an awareness that how you talk to yourself affects the outcomes. So a lot of times we say things like, I wish that I was a morning person, for example. Well, okay, but how do you think about the mornings and how do you talk about the mornings? And for someone who knows that they're not a morning person, they'll say things like, I hate the mornings, or I need my coffee, or they joke about things like, I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, but I don't wake up until 10, those kinds of things. That's all mindset. And what they don't realize is if they want a different outcome, if they want to truly act like a morning person and not like the chipper, sort of annoying kind of people who are chipper in the morning to us. But if you really want to be more productive in the morning, you have to start thinking differently about the morning. And that's all a part of mindset.
Let's look at 2 different scenarios. As I had mentioned in the introduction, let's start with unemployment. You're unemployed. It goes over a longer period of time than you'd wish. Mm-hmm. How do you keep a positive mindset in a situation like that?
Yeah, maintaining a positive mindset is probably the most important and also the most difficult thing to do. So I'll talk about why it's the most important, which is probably obvious, but the most important is it's a lot easier for your friends to introduce you. It's a lot easier to interview more positively if you think positively. But if you are already sort of beat up by the economy and you're beat up by your own thinking, often it's your own thinking of, well, the economy's bad and there aren't any jobs out there. And I can tell you that there are jobs out there. Companies are hiring and companies are willing to create a position if you present yourself in a positive way that they believe will add value to their organization. So in that way, mindset is everything. The value also, or the sort of the techniques, how do you keep your mindset positive? There's a lot of different ways. First of all is the awareness of when your mindset is not positive. So when do you start getting tired or feeling tired? When do you start talking yourself out of things? And then I use the word artificially. How can you artificially, or how can you purposefully change your mindset? And that's what I mean by artificial, is that you have to be conscious about shifting your mindset and becoming more positive. So how do you do that? It starts with just simple little things like sometimes interrupting your patterns. So if you know by mid-morning you've made 5 phone calls and you get voicemail and that's frustrating, then you need to shift the types of phone calls that you're making and just call a friend and just go, hey, I was thinking of you. Whatever aspect of that friend's personality makes you smile, you share something positive about that friend, that they mean something to you in your life. There's no other underlying cause or any underlying reason for the phone call other than I just am calling to tell you you matter to me, and make them feel good. And by you reaching out to somebody else and making them feel good, even if they don't answer their phone, and that you just leave them a voicemail message, you'll just feel a little more lighthearted. You can manage your mindset in that way. It just makes you feel good about yourself.
And if you manage it over a longer period of time, does it become second nature?
It does. It does. You have to be conscious about it. But if you are purposeful and create, it's no different. You have a habit of how you are now. Just create a new habit of being more positive. And that habit is start your morning with call a friend that makes you feel good or that you want to share something positive with. So start your day purposefully with positive news, with positive friends. That will make a difference. And if you do that, that makes a big difference versus turning the news on and hearing again where the economy's not good and you go, yeah, see, I knew it. And you already start talking yourself out of making the first phone call, or even, getting dressed and going out, like to an event, to a morning breakfast or something, because you talk yourself out of it and say, well, what difference does it make? Nobody's hiring anyway. That's all part of your negative mindset.
So when you hear those unemployment numbers, you should say to yourself, hey, they're hiring some people.
Yeah, I mean, the unemployment numbers, again, are something where I'm sure behind the scenes that there's a lot of statistics and a lot of numbers that go into those numbers that can prove or disprove any of that. I think we have to be careful about, while that might be true in some areas, and certainly the numbers are truthful in some areas, there's certainly a lot of examples where those numbers are not indicative of what's happening in a community. And, Kansas City is somewhat of an insulated community from the standpoint of the East Coast and the West Coast seem to get hit harder. Some areas get hit harder, but the Midwest, we have a little different attitude about it overall, and we don't get hit as hard, even though there's certainly some evidence of unemployment. And also businesses, small businesses who buy in, and even large companies that buy into things are slowing down. I read yesterday, and you see this a lot of talk about change and change management, but the real key is not learning how to change, but constantly being adaptive. And that's a little different sound to it, but if you can constantly be adaptive to the environment, you're going to be more resilient to changes that negatively affect you than if you just go, I give up, which of course makes sense.
So there's a personal mindset and then there's a corporate mindset also.
Absolutely. And both can affect the outcomes. I mean, there's scientific evidence that indicates how it affects the outcomes. Here's some real simple examples. When I don't feel good about myself, or I'm frustrated with maybe results that I'm getting. I'm making a lot of phone calls and nobody's answering their phone and nobody's returning my calls, and I'm just overall frustrated. It shows in my body language. So I kind of walk a little slower. I don't have my head up high. I just look tired. And that all of that thinking physiologically affects me to the point that you might glance around a room and I'm in the room, but I don't look very approachable because I don't look like I'm having any fun. And I don't look like, if you did approach me, that we would have a very interesting conversation because I just look sad. So you're just not very approachable when you have that negative mindset. If you can shift your mindset to more investigative, or more, I'm going to go to every event, or I'm going to make every phone call, not necessarily about me, but to learn something. And if you shift your mindset to think, how can I learn from this? Or what information can I learn about the community? Or what questions am I prepared to ask so that I am purposeful about conversations, that we don't end up talking about the economy, we don't talk about the weather, but instead we talk about trends in your industry, or we talk about technology in your industry and how that's affecting the future of your industry. That makes me smarter. And what that does is when you share your expertise with me in my next conversation, I can sound more intelligent because I can say, well, I was having this conversation earlier and we talked about this, and the person I'm talking to has a whole different perception of me based on what I'm talking about. If I'm talking about how I'm frustrated with the economy, that's not a fun conversation to have with others.
So the network that you have is reflective of your attitude or your mindset.
Yeah, I mean, all of us have in our network kind of that whole broad spectrum of positive people and negative people, and then everybody in between. We do have to make a conscious effort to stay away from the people at this particular time in our life. It doesn't mean that we give them up as friends. It just means that if they at this point don't serve you well from an attitude standpoint, maybe they're not the best people to be around. And sometimes, kind of a funny example is our parents. My mom is always concerned about me because she's always my mother. So she might say things to me like, oh, be careful, or, watch out, or do you think that's a good way to grow your business? And if I buy into her skepticism, I might hesitate to make a decision that would have been a piece of cake for me otherwise. And I have to understand that while she's sharing that information with me because she cares about me as her daughter, that doesn't serve me well in making business decisions, and I have to learn how to separate that. That's not always easy, especially when it's a family member or a close personal friend.
How does mindset affect the interview process?
Well, mindset, that's a great question in itself. As you approach, let's say you have an interview scheduled and you pull up to the building. As you're thinking about this position, how you think about the position affects your body language when you get out of the car. And you never know if that interviewer isn't glancing out the window and sees you approach the building. So if you walk out of the car and you've just been talking yourself out of, oh my gosh, I'm sure I'm one of 20 other people they're interviewing, and I'm not sure if I'm qualified, and I don't know if I'm good enough, and this is one more interview, and they never go well for me. All of that thinking affect your body language as you get out of the car. And then imagine the distraction. So you get inside the building and you walk inside the suite of wherever it is that you're going, and you meet the receptionist, and you're so distracted by how this isn't going to go well that you don't really treat the receptionist very nicely. And I know for a fact that organizations often put the receptionist may be their real receptionist, but she's a part of the interview process. She is asked, or he is asked, whoever is in that chair is asked for their opinion about, so, do you think this person would be a good person for our organization? And their perception of, well, were you kind to the receptionist? Did you show interest in the receptionist? If the receptionist is just sort of a gatekeeper to you and you treat them that way, then that may affect the outcome of the whole process before you even got started. Another thing to remember about that person that's sitting at the front desk is if they are not a part of the process, they can be a great advocate and insider to you about information about the position. So I would have a casual conversation. I'd be very prepared for the conversation, but I'd have a casual conversation about, so I'm here to interview for such and such a position, right? And the receptionist would probably say yes. And I'd say, so is the position a new position, or did someone leave recently? And suddenly the receptionist, without realizing how much she's sharing or he's sharing with you, will start telling you all this inside information about, yes, this is the case, and no, it's not that, and the guy you're interviewing with, he's a real stickler about this, or she really wants to hear this. And suddenly you get some great information about the interview, But that's all in engaging the receptionist and honoring them for the role that they have in the company and treating them like an individual versus just a person who happens to be sitting at that desk.
So their mindset could affect you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you need to filter and process that as well. Is, they're just expressing an opinion, but it's kind of an interesting thing to hear is, so where am I at in the process? You still have to manage your own mindset. She might say, well, you're the 20th person we've interviewed today, and you have to manage how you respond to that, because that's also the mindset. Our mindset doesn't just happen, it responds to something. So she says something and we respond with, oh my gosh, or oh, that's great. Whatever the case may be, that also affects our body language as we walk into the interviewer's office. And I have a little technique that I use. It's a 3x5 index card, and it's called an Atta-Girl card. And it's an Atta-Girl for me, but you would have an Atta-Boy card or an I'm the Man card or something like that. But the card, what it does is I tell people to use a card, take a sheet of paper, it doesn't matter, but write on a sheet of paper 10 things that you're particularly proud of. And if you are doing business development, it would be business development types of things. If you're in career transition, it would be career transition types of things. So the 10 things that you're particularly proud of are relevant to whatever you need at that particular time in your life. So if it's career transition, you would write things that you're particularly proud of. And as you read them and think of them. So I literally have a card, and today you could go check my car at this moment. I have a 3x5 card in my visor of my car. And it's sitting there. It's a bright colored index card. I can pull it out as I pull up to the building and park, pull it out and read it and remind myself of things that I'm good at. Because at that time, if I'm starting to get overwhelmed or intimidated by whatever's inside that building, that attitude does not serve me well. But the attitude of, look, you're good at this, you've handled tougher situations before, you're not here because you need a job, you're here because you have something to offer, and here's all the things you have to offer. By reminding yourself of that just before you walk in the door is just a great and very simple technique to use. And it's very effective.
Because mindset is going to affect your body language.
Mm-hmm. It affects your body language. It affects the conversation. Here's a great example. We hear over and over people who say, I'm going to go interview for this job, but it's not a job I want. I'm just going to rehearse the interview. So this is the type of position I'm rehearsing. And so they go in for the rehearsed, sort of the rehearsal of an interview, and they get offered the job. And they come out somewhat bewildered, like, wow, I'm not really even qualified, and I didn't really want it, but I got offered the job, and now they have this dilemma. And the question is, why does someone who didn't really want the job get offered the job? And why is it that someone who really, really wants the job rarely gets offered the job? And the difference is their attitude is reflected in how they answer the questions. So if I don't really want the job, I can kind of relax in the interview. We have a great exchange. We have a conversation. I'm not so guarded in my answers. I'm more relaxed, more truthful, because I can just be genuinely me. That's what the interviewer sees and says, oh my gosh, this is a great fit for us. And they're so comfortable and they're so casual, and they enjoyed the conversation too. But if I need the job, and if I go in with a mindset of I really need this, then I start stuttering with my question, or with the answers to your questions. I second guess every answer versus just having a casual conversation. I don't allow the conversation to flow naturally. It starts to get forced. All of that creates a discomfort for the interviewer. And the interviewer in the end is like, there's something about that person, just really not a good fit. But it's only because I was so uncomfortable, because I had a needy mindset.
Now, not everybody that interviews is unemployed. There are unemployed people looking to improve themselves or just not happy where they are.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So the mindset that they bring from the current job is going to affect also.
Absolutely.
If you are not happy where you are, how do you improve your mindset there?
If you're not happy in your current position?
In your current position.
Yeah, that's a great question as well. I think people focus too much on what they don't like and they forget, I'll put it into a dating scenario. When we first meet somebody and date them, we only see all the wonderful things about them, and we don't see the little nuances that we don't like about them. It's just little things that might irritate us, but it's no big deal in the dating process because we're just so infatuated by them, and in a healthy way. In fact, not only that, but those things that we're attracted to are opposite of us. So you might be a great organizer. I know that I'm not, and so I'm attracted to your organizing skills. Okay, that's the opposites attract. But that's the same thing that later on affects a marriage, because I get irritated by you constantly wanting to organize, and I'm not like that. So what have I done? You're the same person. I knew that when I married you. I knew that when I dated you. So the difference is, when we dated, I focused on what I loved about you and not the little irritations. Same thing in a job environment. If we focus on the things that we were attracted to this company in the first place, or we were if we chose wisely in the beginning, if we focus on what we love about the job, the little nuances aren't so irritating. If we focus on the nuances that are irritating, it magnifies them in our own mind, and we almost forget all the other benefits. So we start looking to the old grass is greener on the other side scenario, and we say, oh, well, that would, I'd rather have that, or this doesn't fit me anymore. And it's only because we're really focusing on the wrong thing.
So in a situation like that, when you're going to an interview for a new position and you have a current job, the mindset should be more, I'm going towards something as opposed to I'm escaping from something. Right,
exactly. And actually the attitude of I'm escaping for something can cause you to make a poor decision, because again, you're looking for the opposite. And it may not be that you're looking for the opposite, you're just looking for a slight tweak. So certainly all of that attitude does affect, and it affects how you sound in the interview too. If you're blaming, or sound like you're blaming, or sound like, it's not my fault. Well, if I'm interviewing you, I want someone who takes accountability and takes responsibility. So if I hear a tone of you blaming your current employer, for example, how can I be assured that you're not going to blame me when time comes, or when you get a little bit dissatisfied? I make all of those judgments based on how you're talking about the current job that you have. So yes, looking forward to, in fact, even looking forward to is a great mindset shift kind of thinking as well. I can shift my mindset by looking forward to, rather than reflecting on what isn't happening or what's not going as well as I'd like it to.
So whether you're unemployed or employed, you shouldn't come across as desperate either. That's right.
When you are needy sounding, I had a situation where a friend of mine, I had a position in mind for her, and she'd been unemployed for a lengthy period of time. And I'll go back to that primary aspect of networking. One of the saddest things, I think, is when people talk themselves out of asking their friends for help. As a friend, I want to be able to help my friends, and I am honored when they ask me. I'm never bothered by it. No matter how busy I am never too bothered. I am never bothered by my friends asking for help. And so, but yet people might perceive that, so they talk themselves out of asking. And I had a friend who, didn't bother me for a long time, and finally came to me and said, look, I'm desperate. I need some help. And so I sat down, I talked her through a lot of different kinds of things, and I know her talents. I mean, she's a friend, I know her well. So I looked to ways that I could help her, and came up with a couple of great ideas and made a couple of phone calls. And when I called her back to talk to her about a couple of opportunities that I'd uncovered for her, when she answered the phone, she sounded so desperate and so tired that I was concerned that was going to come through in the conversation that she had with those potential employers that I'd set up with her. And we had to have a real serious conversation about that, because I knew right away it was just her tone of voice. Even if she were to call them and leave a voicemail message, her desperation and her frustration and almost depression at that point was absolutely coming across simply in her tone of voice, over and above her body language. You wouldn't have even seen that yet. But that made such a difference in me hesitating to introduce her to someone who said, I absolutely would talk to her. Sounds like she's got the exact skill set that we're looking for right now. I hesitated to make the introduction because of how my friend sounded.
But at least you gave them the opportunity to make the decision of saying yes or no to you, as opposed to your saying no and not affording that opportunity.
Right. But I think that's an important part of, you have a responsibility to your friends, again, to make them look good. So if you get an introduction, you need to put your best self forward in that introduction, because it is a reflection on your friend, and you want to honor your friend in that way as well, and thank them for the gift of the introduction, or the gift of the opportunity, or the gift of a conversation. I think we also need to remember that we're not always asking for a job. We're asking for introductions to discover what might be our next career opportunity, whether we're employed, whether we're not employed, or whether we have a business and we're developing business opportunities. We can always learn from each other. And if you approach the conversations with that mindset, it's a much more relevant, much more interesting conversation to have. The questions that you ask are much more comfortable. The way that you answer are much more comfortable than when you approach with that very, very needy, almost desperate mindset.
Well, I want to thank you for making this a positive conversation.
And thank you.
And if somebody wanted to reach you for more advice, information, where could they reach you?
So they can always reach me at LeaderFuelNow, and my email address is denise.mills@leaderfuelnow.com. That's the easiest way to reach me, and I'm happy to help anybody. And I will also remind people that by asking me for help, whether you know me or not, I'm happy to help you and give you advice. Your friends are happy to give you advice as well. So don't leave them out. Be sure that you ask them for help as well.
Thank you, Denise. You can hear more from Denise Mills or some of our other experts if you go to www.newlandingsjobchat.org, or you can just go to YouTube and look up Job Chat. Until next time, may your days be full of health, happiness, and success.